The fight started when I got a letter demanding I cease and desist all unauthorized use of HOA property, specifically my backyard pool. That's right. My pool. The one I paid to have installed 2 summers ago. The one I maintain. The one I pay higher property taxes for. According to Karren Pendle, our HOA president and full-time nuisance, my pool now belonged to the community. I'm Jonah Caster, contractor, dad, and the unfortunate owner of a house in Ridgewalk Meadows, an HOA-run neighborhood where the rules change based on Karren's mood and how recently she's had a Chardonnay. So there I was reading her nonsense letter while eating leftover brisket on my patio when she strutted up my driveway in her floral visor and wedge sandals. "You've illegally privatized a community amenity," she said, waving a folder in my face like it held the Constitution. "We've decided your pool should be accessible to all Ridgewalk residents." I blinked. "You've decided that my private pool is public property?" She clucked her tongue like I was the dumb one. "You're on the HOA. You should know we have jurisdiction over shared assets." I brought documentation. She pulled out a stapled packet with one page highlighted in pink. It was a vague clause about community recreational resources. I laughed. "That's meant for the community park and tennis court, not my backyard." Karren didn't flinch. "Well, the HOA board voted and it passed 3-2. Your pool is now a community amenity, effective immediately." "Funny," I said, "because the land deed still says it belongs to me." She sniffed. "You'll be hearing from our lawyer." I watched her march off while sipping sweet tea and flipping through the bylaws. I wasn't worried yet. But then, over the next week, people started showing up. Uninvited. Kids splashing in the deep end. Strangers dragging coolers up my side gate. One guy even grilled on my patio like he lived there. I kicked out every last one. When I told Karren to knock it off, she handed me a fine. $200 per day for denying community access. I nearly choked. "You're fining me for using my own pool?" "It's not just your pool anymore," she said flatly. That's when I got an idea. If they wanted to act like my pool was public, fine. I'd treat it like a business. I made a few calls, put up a listing online, and by the next weekend, my backyard was booked for birthday parties, baby showers, and even a bachelorette bash. I charged fair rates unless you were on the HOA board. Then I tripled it. Karren showed up the following Tuesday in a wide-brimmed hat and a neon one-piece, dragging a folding chair. "Pool's booked," I said, checking my clipboard. "I'm the HOA president," she huffed. "I don't need to book." "Oh, you do now. That'll be $150 for the afternoon. Cash up front." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She stormed off. Within a week, she tried to shut me down again, called it unauthorized commercial activity. But I wasn't selling anything. I was renting out my private property, well within city ordinances. I knew because I checked, and I'd already filed a complaint with the city about HOA overreach. What Karren didn't know yet was that I had a lawyer friend, and we were just getting started. By the second Saturday, the pool rental calendar was packed through August. I'd built a website, added terms of use, and even had a waiver people signed before stepping onto the property. Karren had no idea I used her ridiculous claim as the basis for a legitimate side business. I wasn't just retaliating, I was turning a profit while keeping everything above board. Tuesday morning, I got a visit from Leonard Burks, Ridgewalk Meadows treasurer. He waited until I was pulling mulch bags from the back of my work truck before stepping onto the driveway like he owned it. "You're creating liability for the association," he said, eyes twitching behind wire-framed glasses. "If someone gets hurt during one of these events, we could be sued." I didn't stop stacking. "If you're worried about liability, you might want to talk to your president. She's the one who declared my yard public space." "That was a miscommunication," he said, voice tightening. "We never intended." "Leonard," I cut in, I recorded the entire conversation. She said, effective immediately. "That's a legal statement. You all backed her vote. You want to backpedal now, go ahead, but you'll have to do it publicly." He shifted on his feet. "We'll be calling an emergency board meeting." "You do that," I said, slinging the last bag over my shoulder. "I'll bring the rental contracts and tax documents. Should be a fun night." That same evening, someone tampered with my security cameras. I reviewed the footage, grainy images of a person in a hoodie climbing the fence near the equipment box. They didn't steal anything, just unplugged 2 of the cameras and tried to disable the motion sensors. Luckily, I'd installed a backup battery that kept everything running. I reported it to the police. Vandalism and trespassing. They took it seriously, especially when I handed over the footage and mentioned the ongoing dispute with the HOA. I also emailed the footage to my attorney, Marcus, who immediately filed a request for a restraining order against any unauthorized access to my property by HOA board members. Wednesday afternoon, a certified envelope arrived. This one wasn't from the HOA, it was from a law firm in town. Apparently, Karren had convinced the board to hire outside counsel. The letter accused me of operating a for-profit business in violation of community zoning bylaws. They demanded I cease all bookings and provide a list of every guest who had used the pool. I called Marcus. "They're bluffing," he said after reading the copy I scanned him. "The HOA can't even enforce zoning. That's a municipal issue. If they'd bothered to check, they'd know the city passed a short-term rental exemption for single-owner residences last year. You're in full compliance." He paused. "But the demand for guest information? That's potentially a privacy violation. They're trying to intimidate you. How do I respond?" I asked. "You don't," he said. "I will." That Friday, Marcus filed a formal complaint with the county ombudsman outlining the HOA's unauthorized attempts to exert legal authority beyond their governing documents. He also sent a cease and desist to the HOA's hired law firm, citing harassment and abusive process. Meanwhile, word about the pool parties spread beyond Ridgewalk. A local mom group booked 3 weekends in a row. A firefighter from a few streets over asked to host his retirement party there. I even had a couple from the next town ask about renting it for a small wedding. Karren, of course, hated every second of it. She retaliated by having the HOA maintenance crew install a temporary sign near the front gate of the neighborhood that read, "Unauthorized commercial activity is prohibited in Ridgewalk Meadows. Violators will be fined." The sign didn't even go through a vote. And worse, it was placed on city easement property, something I confirmed with a quick call to Public Works. So I made a second call. This one to a journalist I'd met during a sidewalk repair contract downtown. Her name was Talia. She covered local governance issues and had written exposés on corrupt city council members and shady developers. I gave her the whole story, complete with documents, video evidence, and screenshots of the HOA's emails. By Sunday, the story was published online. The headline? HOA declares private pool public, gets schooled by local contractor with legal receipts. The article blew up. It got picked up by a regional news outlet by Monday morning. The comments section roasted Karren and the board into oblivion. Residents from other neighborhoods chimed in with their own HOA horror stories. One guy even offered to donate to my legal fund, though I didn't need it. That week, Karren vanished from visibility. No driveway lectures. No clipboard ambushes. She even missed the emergency board meeting, which went ahead anyway. I showed up with Marcus and a binder so thick it made Leonard sigh when I set it on the table. "Let's get this over with," I said as I sat down. There were only 3 board members present: Leonard, a woman named Denise, who mostly kept quiet, and Walt, the vice president who once tried to fine a family for putting up Halloween decorations in September. Marcus opened with a short statement. "My client has been harassed, his property rights have been trampled, and he's been subject to public misrepresentation by this board. We're here to present evidence of multiple violations, including unlawful entry, falsified fines, and misappropriation of HOA authority." Leonard raised a hand. "We're not here to argue, just to clarify procedures." "Then why were trespassers sent to tamper with my security system?" I asked. They all looked at each other. Walt cleared his throat. "That wasn't sanctioned by the board." "So someone acted independently?" Marcus asked. "Because I've already filed a police report. If that person's linked to this HOA, it becomes criminal conspiracy." Denise finally spoke, voice low. "We didn't approve any of that." Karren acted on her own. Leonard nodded reluctantly. "She stopped communicating with us after the article went live. We don't know what she's planning." Marcus folded his hands. "Then you'll consider this our formal request for a full audit of Ridgewalk Meadows financials and enforcement actions from the past 2 years." Any further contact with my client must come through legal channels. They didn't argue. They voted to suspend all fines issued to me and agreed to remove the sign by the front gate. But that wasn't enough. The next day, I filed a petition with the city to have Ridgewalk Meadows HOA status reviewed under the Municipal Oversight Act. It was a little-known clause that allowed the city to revoke an HOA's authority if they were found guilty of systemic abuse or fraud. It had only been used once in our county, but it was still on the books. Talia picked up the story again. The headline this time read, Power Trip, Ridgewalk HOA facing potential dissolution after contractor exposes abuse. Within 48 hours, residents began knocking on my door not to complain, but to thank me. A retired veteran named Mr. Leary offered to help collect signatures for the petition. A nurse from down the street showed me photos of a rusted-out playground the HOA had ignored for years while jacking up dues. A group of younger residents offered to create a website to coordinate the recall vote. It wasn't just about my pool anymore. It was about taking back control. And Karren? She was still off the grid. But I had a feeling she wasn't done yet. I was welding a new gate latch when the detective showed up. Not a patrol cop. A real badge and plainclothes detective, early 40s, firm handshake, eyes like he'd seen too much nonsense for one lifetime. He introduced himself as Detective Rames and asked if I had a few minutes to talk inside. He kept it professional, but I caught the glance he gave my camera set up on the way in like he already knew they'd been tampered with and wasn't surprised. I offered him coffee. He declined. You filed a vandalism report a few weeks back. Security equipment was targeted, no entry gained, but the footage caught someone in your yard, he said, flipping open a well-worn notebook. Correct, I said. Did the footage help? It did. We ran facial recognition on the stills. Got a partial hit, someone with priors for trespassing and property damage. Not a local. So what's the connection? He looked up from his notes. That's what I'm wondering. This guy's from 2 counties over. No ties to this neighborhood, no reason to be here. But he was paid in cash the week before to do a quiet favor in Ridgewalk Meadows. Only name he gave was Kay. Said she handed him printed satellite images and a $100 bill. My jaw tensed. Karren Pendle. She fit the description he gave, but she's not answering her phone or opening the door. We swung by her house, blinds drawn, mailbox overflowing. We're opening a formal investigation for conspiracy to commit property crime. Do you have any more documentation? I handed him a flash drive with everything I'd gathered, timestamps, photos, audio clips, even the metadata from my camera system showing the exact moment the signal was interrupted. He pocketed it without a word and left with a nod. By the time I stepped outside again, word had already spread. Turns out, the article about the pool wasn't the only thing Karren's enemies forwarded around. A few former board members had contacted the city, alleging that HOA dues had been siphoned into a private account for years, one that Karren controlled exclusively. She'd masked it as capital improvement escrow, but there were no records of any improvements being made. The city assigned a financial auditor, and the county issued a subpoena for Ridgewalk's HOA financials. I hadn't even gotten the petition signatures in yet, and already the walls were closing in on her from 3 directions. That night, a woman named Gabriella knocked on my door. I recognized her immediately. She lived near the Greenbelt and worked nights at the regional hospital. She looked tired, but her eyes were sharp. I caught someone trying to lift my trash bin lid last night, she said, handing me a grainy photo from her phone. Same guy from your footage, I think. He was looking at something under the bags. I keep my old mail under them, bills, HOA letters, anything with my name. My stomach sank. That's targeted. They're looking for personal info. Exactly. I filed a report already and gave them this photo. But I think they're trying to dig into anyone who supported you publicly. She wasn't wrong. The next day, a landscaper I'd hired to regrade the slope behind my pool told me someone from the HOA approached him in the alley behind the fence and offered double to delay work indefinitely. He didn't take the deal, just laughed and came straight to me. I paid him his regular rate and added a bonus for being honest. Then I contacted Marcus again. I want to file for an emergency injunction, I said. Restraining order isn't enough anymore. They're going after my neighbors. They're interfering with contractors. We need to push this into criminal court. He didn't hesitate. I'll draft it tonight. We'll request a hearing by Friday. While Marcus worked the legal angle, I focused on the recall. The petition had grown legs. More than 80 residents signed on in 48 hours. Mr. Leary organized a door-to-door team. The nurse from down the block built a private chat group with over 60 members all ready to testify. Then something unexpected happened. I got a letter from Walt, the vice president. Hand-delivered, no envelope, just a folded sheet of paper tucked under a rock on my porch. It said, "I'm resigning. Call me." I did. Walt picked up on the first ring, his voice low like he didn't want anyone in his house to overhear. "I didn't know about the money," he said. "I thought she was just overstepping." But Denise found an old ledger in a storage box from 2 years ago. It shows the escrow account transferring funds to a private P.O. box in another township. She's been embezzling. "How much?" I asked. "At least 70,000, he said. "Maybe more." My blood ran cold. "Then why are you calling me?" "Because we're all liable. If this gets prosecuted, the board could be held responsible unless we cooperate. I'm getting out before my name's on a subpoena." "Smart." "There's more," he said. "She tried to get the HOA to buy her house last month." I blinked. "What?" "She pitched it like a community guest house, said it would be good for hosting events and board meetings. She even had a fake appraisal claiming it was worth almost double its actual value. The board rejected it, but only by 1 vote. That explained her desperation. If she sold her house to the HOA, she could have pocketed a massive chunk of community funds and walked away clean. But when that failed, she doubled down, tried to take my pool, scare off my allies, and bury the paper trail. It was unraveling now. By the end of the week, 3 board members had resigned. Denise submitted the ledger to the city. Detective Rames confirmed that Karren was officially wanted for questioning and a warrant had been issued for her arrest. Her car was gone. Her house was dark. But she'd left behind a mess so public, so grotesque, that even the local news stations started digging in. Talia ran a follow-up story, this time focused on the financial abuse. Her latest headline read, "HOA president on the run after alleged embezzlement and targeted harassment scandal." The photo beneath it was a blurry frame of Karren from the security footage, face half-turned, caught mid-stride under a street lamp. I was halfway through restaining the back deck when Marcus called. "City Council wants to schedule a formal hearing," he said. "They're invoking municipal review. If the majority of homeowners vote yes, the HOA loses its charter." Meaning Ridgewalk Meadows becomes a civic association with advisory power only. No more fines. No more nonsense. And certainly no more Karren. I hung up and stood still on the deck, breathing in the smell of sawdust and summer air. By Sunday, every resident received a ballot in the mail. Monday, the pool was back to being just a pool. I canceled the bookings and refunded the deposits. I didn't need the money. I'd only done it to prove a point, and now the point had been made loud and clear. Gabriella dropped by that evening with a mason jar of homemade salsa and a thank you note. She didn't stay long, had another shift coming up. But before she left, she said something that stuck with me. "You didn't just stand up for yourself," she said. "You made the rest of us realize we could too." The vote was tallied the following Friday. 112 for dissolution. 6 against. The Ridgewalk Meadows HOA was officially disbanded. The city assigned a temporary administrator to oversee the transition. A new civic board would be formed, this time with public oversight. No more secret meetings. No more weaponized bylaws. Just neighbors looking out for each other. As for Karren? They caught her 3 weeks later 40 miles out, hiding in a short-term rental under her sister's name. She was charged with embezzlement, conspiracy to commit property crime, and obstruction. She pled not guilty, but the evidence was stacked like firewood. I didn't go to the trial. I didn't need to. I had my yard back. My pool was mine again. My neighbors were empowered, the corruption exposed, and the people who tried to intimidate and manipulate us had been held accountable. It took time, grit, and more than a little stubbornness. But we won. 2 weeks after the HOA was officially dissolved, Ridgewalk Meadows felt like a different place. Yards that once sat stiff and silent were now buzzing with neighbors chatting across fences, kids riding bikes without sideways glances from clipboard hawks, and porches finally felt like extensions of homes again, not violations waiting to happen. With the power vacuum left behind, the city-appointed administrator began working with a temporary committee made up of volunteers. I stayed out of it. I'd done my part. But one thing still itched at the back of my mind: the missing money. Karren had been arrested, sure, but her arraignment kept getting pushed. Marcus said her defense attorney was stalling, trying to negotiate a plea deal before all the financials were fully unfurled. I wasn't thrilled about that. Someone who tried to take over my backyard like it was a public park shouldn't get to squirm their way out of consequences. So I started looking into the ledger Denise had uncovered. She'd made a copy and handed it over to the city, but she kept the original, said she didn't trust anything digital anymore. I dropped by her place one evening under the pretense of returning a folding chair I'd borrowed during the petition drives. "You're here for the ledger," she said the moment she opened the door. I rubbed the back of my neck. I was hoping to take a closer look at the last few entries. "Something's been bugging me." She led me into her dining room where the old binder sat next to a cold cup of tea. "You're not the only one. There's something off about her withdrawals. They don't match any known expenses. Look at this one: community outreach disbursement, $5,000, withdrawn in cash, no receipt, no meeting minutes." I flipped through the pages, noting the pattern: large withdrawals every few months, always labeled vaguely, none tied to any actual improvement or project. One entry caught my eye. It was dated the week before Karren declared the pool a public amenity. It read, "Special external consultation, $2,500. Consultation for what?" I asked. "No clue," Denise said. She never mentioned it in a single meeting. I snapped a photo of the page and sent it to Marcus. He called me an hour later. "That's enough to crack open a bigger investigation," he said. "I'll notify the DA's office. They'll want to link the funds to a service or contractor. If it can't be verified, it's grounds for a fraud enhancement." "What if she paid someone off?" I asked. "Then it's conspiracy." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the guy who'd tampered with my cameras, the one Detective Rames said had no local ties. What if he wasn't a one-off? What if Karren had been hiring people for more than just sabotage? The next morning, I went to the city records office and requested Ridgewalk's HOA filings from the past 5 years. Most of it was standard meeting minutes, maintenance invoices, vendor contracts. But one set of documents stood out: a short-term services agreement with a security consultant named J. Harlan, signed 6 months prior. The address listed didn't exist. The contract had no deliverables, no badge number, and no payment terms beyond hourly. I handed the file to Marcus, who passed it to Rames. 3 days later, the detective called me back. "We found your guy, J. Harlan is an alias. Real name's Jared Hensley. He's got a sealed juvenile record and a string of adult charges for impersonating licensed professionals. Served time for posing as a building inspector in another county." I leaned against the workbench in my garage. "So how does he tie back to Karren?" Rames cleared his throat. "We recovered a burner phone from her rental property. It had text messages coordinating payments to a Jared H. for site assessments and equipment interference. That's your guy. She paid him to scope out your backyard, disable your cameras, even scout your neighbor's trash. Did she admit it?" "She's not talking. But the DA's adding charges: wire fraud, impersonation, conspiracy, and use of illicit funds for criminal activity." The trial moved forward fast after that. The courtroom was packed on the first day. Neighbors, reporters, even a few former HOA allies who now sat near the back, faces tight with embarrassment. Karren walked in wearing a tailored gray suit, but the confident posture she'd once used to barge across lawns was gone. She looked cornered, pale, with a legal pad clutched in both hands like it might shield her from what was coming. Marcus testified first, laying out the paper trail in meticulous detail. Every shady withdrawal, every unauthorized contract. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with a stare that could freeze fire, asked pointed questions about the HOA structure and the misuse of power. Denise testified next, confirming that none of the expenses were ever disclosed to the board. Then came Rames. He laid out the conspiracy. The fake consultant, the burner phone, the hired sabotage. The courtroom was silent as he detailed how Karren had diverted HOA funds to manipulate, threaten, and control homeowners under the guise of community improvement. Then he dropped the final bombshell. The defendant attempted to sell her home to the HOA at an inflated appraisal using a falsified market analysis created by a company she personally registered under a shell LLC. That turned heads. The prosecutor followed up with documentation showing that the LLC had no employees, no address beyond a UPS box, and that Karren had signed both the buyer and seller sides of the sham proposal. By the end of day 4, her lawyer requested a plea deal. The judge rejected it. Given the scale, duration, and calculated nature of the defendant's actions, she said, this court finds no compelling reason to reduce charges. The sentence, 16 years with no possibility of parole for at least 8. The courtroom didn't cheer. No one clapped. But the collective exhale from the gallery was louder than any applause. It was relief. Closure. Outside the courthouse, I ran into Gabriella. She looked more relaxed than I'd ever seen her, like the tension that had built up over years of quiet dread had finally broken. I never thought I'd see the day, she said, scanning the steps behind us. You think she'll appeal? I asked. She can try. But nobody's buying what she's selling anymore. Ridgewalk changed after that. The temporary committee became a permanent civic board. Elections were held every 2 years and all meetings were streamed online. Budgets were public. Volunteers handled most tasks and disputes went through the city's mediation office, not into someone's mailbox with a thread attached. The pool? I kept it private, just like it was always meant to be. I put up a new fence layered with dense shrubs for privacy. I donated the party rental equipment to the community park and threw a barbecue there once a month. No charge. Just a way to bring people together without anyone trying to dictate who got to sit where. One Sunday afternoon, as I was flipping burgers next to the park pavilion, Mr. Leary came over with a lemonade and raised his cup. You know, he said, there's a lot of ways to fight back. But you played it the smart way. You didn't yell. You didn't back down. You just outmaneuvered her. I tapped his cup with mine. She claimed my pool like it was her birthright. Guess she didn't expect me to turn it into a business. He chuckled. She turned her own lies into handcuffs. Can't get more poetic than that. We stood there for a moment, the smell of grilled corn and charcoal drifting through the air, laughter echoing from the playground behind us. For the first time in a long while, Ridgewalk Meadows felt like home. No threats. No fines. No power-hungry tyrants hiding behind fake rules. Just neighbors. And a pool that finally belonged to no one but me.